So this is the Else News, the ElseNerds Else News of the week, and we have two news stories, but they have a bunch of minor or like sub stories in between them. The first one is that essentially all the main cast of Marvel's Runaways has been cast, starting um with the kids, the
The
main
kids,
kids.
the actual Runaways.
Yeah, the actual Runaways. You have, and I'm going to butcher names, so I apologize right now. But Renzi Felix, you might know him from Casual and Teen Wolf. He will play Alex Wilder. Then you have Lyrica Akona from The Affair and Unforgettable as Nico Minoru. Um, Virginia Gardner from Goat and Little Bitches as Carolina Dean. Ariella Barrere from New Girl and One Day at a Time as Gert Yorks. I'm like, wait, One Day at a Time. I knew this one here. She played the daughter's best friend in there on the Netflix version, not the original version. And then Greg
She's not
Sulkin.
hanging around with Valerie Bertinelli in the
Yeah,
70s, coming back to play a teenager in 2017.
she's a wizard.
I mean,
Greg,
Valerie Bertinelli looks pretty young, but that's still something to pull off. That's some Marvel
yeah,
magic right there. That is some grade A fucking Michael Douglas and Ant-Man shit happening, if that's the case.
yes. The next one, Greg Sulkin will be from Faking It, Don't Hang Up, Antisocial. He'll be playing Chase Stein. Um, and then the one who got the most rejiggering of the Runaways, Allegra Acosta from 100 Things to Do Before High School, and Just Add Magic will be playing Molly Hernandez. Um,
Molly
as you
Hernandez, not an actual character from the original Runaways. It was Molly Hayes. Molly Hayes typically portrayed younger in the comics, and also something that's difficult to deal with in this context is a mutant in the comics, and I don't know if that's something they're going to necessarily be able to bring across or want to bring across to the show, tying in mutants to it. But already there's so much ingrained into who these characters are into the mainstream Marvel universe. It'll be interesting to see how they play that out as we get to know them, and as Greg is about to mention, get to know their parents.
Yeah, and real quick, because I was sort of curious as to this, but Allegra Acosta, she's actually 14 years old, so she is considerably younger than a lot of the other actors who will be who will be playing the kids. But yeah, and then they also cast the parents of the Runaways. You have Ryan Sands from Hat Hair and The Wire playing Jeffrey Wilder. These are Alex Wilder's parents, and then Angel Parker from The People versus O.J. Simpson and The Strain as Catherine Wilder. Brittany Ishibashi from This Is Us, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Out of the Shadows as Tina Minoru. And then James Yagashi from Breakfast at Tiffany's on Broadway and Madam Secretary. They're playing Nico Minoru's parents. Kevin Wiseman from Hello Ladies and Alias as Dale Yorks. And Bridget Brennig from Army Wives and True Colors as Stacy Yorks. They are Gert's parents. Annie Wershing from Timeless and Vampire Diaries as Leslie Dean. And Kit Pardue from Remember the Titans and Ray Donovan as Frank Dean. They are Carolina Dean's parents. And then James Marsters from Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel is playing Victor Stein. And Ever Carradine from The Handmaid's Tale and Goliath as Janet Stein. These are who the Chase Stein's parents. That explains why they cast Greg Sulkin in my eyes, because Greg Sulkin is one of the ones that I know the most of. Well, not know the most, but I've seen the most of him because he was in the Disney Channel show the fuck is Wizards of Waverly Place. And I look at this, I'm like, I pictured Chase Stein when I read the comic, and I have the first volume up on my bookshelf above me here, as more nerdy. He's more Abercrombie model than, the when you think of the nerd, um,
I don't know.
person.
When I read the comics, I saw Chase as more of an all around, not exactly jocktacular, but a popular guy, a pretty confident guy, and that's part of what the relationship between him and Gert is. And this, I will mention that one of my friends who has cosplayed Gert and everything was kind of upset with the Gert casting because Gert is a larger character, and there are
Yes.
not a lot of characters like that in representation in comics. And a big exploration of her character was her relationship with Chase, and it
Yep.
was explored. It was purposely explored by Brian K. Vaughan that the bigger girl gets the guy in this comic. He wanted that to be part of the story, um, and so there's some complaints and realistically some understandable complaints about the portrayal of is the actress who's playing Gert, is she gonna bulk up for this role? Is that something they're even gonna approach in this? And it's always kind of hard to say how well these things transfer from comics to screen. The other one being Molly, obviously. We'll have to see how any of this passes along. And there's also the question of the expectations of, we know at this point what the storyline is for the Runaways when it first starts out. We know the backstory of the characters. We know some of the reveals that happen. And when you're trying to move this over to the TV show, are they going to follow that in the same steps? Are they going to do a little bit different? How is that going to play out? Because there's some pretty major things that happen, which I don't want to spoil for anybody. If you've never read Runaways, it is, to me, one of the best books to come out of Marvel in the last since the 2000s started. I think it's
Yeah.
easily one of the best books, but it's also because it was kind of in its own little world while picking what it needed to out of the Marvel universe. It got to exist kind of standing alone, and it lost track, I think, more when it got involved in crossover stuff. And now all the characters have been kind of spread to the ashes. It's
Mm-hmm.
You see Nico in A
A-Force.
Force, you see Carolina and other stuff, but rarely do you see these characters as the team that they once were, or getting follow up to their story. It's now been like, well, we'll just utilize them in these other things, and I don't really love that. I mean, it made sense at the time to do crossovers with the Young Avengers because they were the other kind of premier teen comic happening at that point. But this was something different. This was something special, and I know that when Brian left the book, it made it tough for it to continue. There were some other people who came out and wrote. Terry Moore did a storyline on it. Joss Whedon did a storyline on it, and they were hit or miss with what people felt as far as how it dealt with things that had happened before. But it was a very beloved book, beloved characters, and I'm excited to see it hit the screen. I have concerns, but I don't really know what to expect. And
Yeah.
these are certainly some good people that have put into this. James Marsters is the one that I'm most familiar with because obviously I was a big Buffy and Angel fan, and Spike kicked ass, and James has kicked ass and other things. So I hope he gets this thing. But just in general, I look forward to this, but I'm as trepidatious of it as I am any Marvel series coming to TV at this point, with one exception we'll get to later. At least the problem is I care about this so much
Yeah.
that I feel more worried about this than I do about, say, Cloak and Dagger,
Mm-hmm.
who are characters that I've long time familiarity with, but I mostly don't care about.
Yeah. I will say, because these, I I credit the Runaways for where Glenn is the one who got me over the tipping point to just read comic books all the goddamn time. Runaways and Ultimate Spider-Man were the first two um books that I would pick up. I'm not going to say regularly, because that's not really the case, but that I would go to the bookstore and try to find, but before I realized there's a comic book store, um and try to find the trade paperbacks of them, or go into Target, because I think I got this Marvel Age thing. I think I got it from Target that has the first issue of the Runaways in there. If I remember correctly, actually, I'm gonna grab it since it's right here. I think it's a flip issue with X-Men. Oh no, it's just straight up. Yeah, it's that the full. I think it's the whole first volume actually. Pride and Joy
Yeah,
from
and when you say Ultimate Spider-Man, do you mean when it was still Peter, or do you mean when it changed over to Miles?
very first with Peter. The
Yeah, I
I
mean,
have Yeah, I've got like volume 1, 3, 5, 7, something like that. Like it's weird numbering with what I have.
those are two very incredible series to have jumped in on at that point in time, in particular, because they were new. Obviously, Spider-Man, we knew who Spider-Man was, but it was a modern retelling of the character. It was in the Ultimate Universe. They got to do things very differently. Brian Bendis was writing it, and just had and Bagley drawing it was incredible. They just had a very great, unique way of telling Peter's story that was both true to the origins of the character and made sense for today's readers. And then Runaways, again, it's like this is so 100% Marvel, except it's not Marvel universe that you've explored before. It's not Marvel characters that you know. It's something different. And I think that was really incredible. You look at what Marvel's doing right now, which is they're replacing a lot of their main characters with new people in the roles. That's a little bit different. Also, the amount of characters that are coming out that are somehow tied into this Inhumans event. I don't know if that is as appealing to me because of the fact that it all kind of stems from the same stuff, and it's almost, it's not exactly regurgitation, but it's not original ideas. And at this point in time, what Vaughn did on this is there was original ideas. Not far from that time, although a very different book, was Warren Ellis and Stuart Immonen doing Next Wave, which
Mhm.
another book that greatly explored what the Marvel Universe had and was, but did new and interesting things with it and didn't really go into the mainstream books. It got to exist on its own, and that made it a little bit more spectacular, I think.
Yeah. Um, but no, yeah, and I did get this at Target because I was looking through at the because they had the also available part here, but then you flip it over where you actually get the splash page where it tells you what everything's at, and down at the bottom it said Target Runaways Pride and Joy. And I'm like, wait, Target? I'm like, oh, okay, it must have been from Target. A Target exclusive thing that they had at the time. But no, I am excited. I said this in the pre-show. I feel like the casting for um Alex's parents and Nico's parents seems pretty spot on. And actually, I'll even say for Nico um herself, I will agree with your friend on Gert, the casting of Gert. Like I saw her, I'm like, she seems a little skinny. Like I remember Gertrude being, bigger and all that. So
Yeah, Gert definitely was a larger character, which didn't make her. And I want to be very clear about this. It didn't make her less attractive. It was just that was a characteristic of her. At the same time, Glenn, who you shouldn't tell about this show, did mention in reply to my friend who I was having a discussion with on Facebook when I first saw this news. He said that the young lady that they picked to play Gert is excellent on the One Day at a Time remake
yes.
that's on Netflix right now, and he thinks that she'll do a very good job at it. And I've looked and I've seen pictures of stuff online of her, and I can see that she might be able to nail the attitude. And to me, that's a big essential as well as a look. But I get why the look on this character in particular is so important, because there's unfortunately not a lot of examples of that, and I think that's
Yeah.
unfortunate. And I get why, if you felt like this is a character you connected with because they made you feel represented in comics, to not see that happen when they go to the screen is a big deal. I agree. I completely agree.
Yep, definitely. Our next story is an umbrella story here, folks. It's about umbrellas. I bought a new one. No, that's not it. It's about Kevin Smith, and we haven't talked about him in a while. And this is the first part of the story is that pour one out for um for Mallrats 2 and
Clerks
Clerks
3.
3 because as we were seeing here on the video, um Kevin Smith is those fell through, so Kevin Smith is working on a Jay and Silent Bob movie or project. And so yeah, that's actually pretty, it's sad to see the other two things going, especially with what we had heard about with the TV show or the Mallrats. I think at one point it got turned into a TV show.
Yeah, that's exactly it. He was doing Mallrats 2, and then the project grew, and he decided to do it as a TV series instead, and it didn't get picked up. Now, I remember him going through, and like he was mentioning, oh, I've just signed this person to be in Mallrats 2, and then it was like, I just signed this person to be in Mallrats 2. So a lot of the cast were coming back, and it was pretty important to see that happen. And then I think it maybe turned into a Mallrats of the next generation kind of thing, where we were going to see those original characters, but we're going to see them interspersed with younger characters hanging at the mall, which makes a certain degree of sense. I would assume that his daughter would have had a part to play in it.
Yeah.
She's certainly becoming more known for being in his projects. It'll be interesting to see her wind up in stuff that he doesn't have anything to do with, but that does eventually happen, and I think that she'll show that she's earned that. The Clerks 3 thing was a little different because that became more of an internal problem. Is that one of the main stars of the Clerks movies decided they didn't want to come back to do this movie, and I don't know if that's because of differences between them and Kevin, or problems with the script, or they just decided that they didn't want to act anymore. uh in both cases, it's a disappointing thing. I think Clerks 2 was a very strong film considering how long had gone between it and the first Clerks. Also because Kevin had stepped away from doing the Askewverse characters in lieu of other things because of some problems that Jason Mewes had been having with drugs was a primary reason. But when Jason cleaned up and was ready to come back, Kevin's like, well, good, then let's do this thing. I'd love to tell this story with these characters. And coming back the third time would have been nice to see. At the same time, one of the things Kevin said for years that kind of stuck out of my head, which goes back to when he was closing down shop on Askew, was no one wants to see Jay and Silent Bob in their 40s. And that's exactly what we're getting, because Kevin Smith is my age. And I assume Jason has got to be pretty close. That's what's going to happen. Is if there's going to be a Jay and Silent Bob movie, I hope to God it's not like the animated film that they did a couple years ago that to me was just horrendous.
Yeah.
After such an incredible Clerks animated series, to see that animated movie just be a pile of shit. I don't want that Jay and Silent Bob back, certainly. And it sounds also like it's a follow-up to Jay and Silent Bob Strikes Back, is that because of the remake craze, Hollywood's going to remake the Jay and Silent Bob movie, and they're going to have to go and fight that again. It's a little too back to the well for me, and I don't know by the pitch.
It does sound like a reboot, but they're rebooting the Bluntman and Chronic movie that they were trying to stop in Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back.
Yeah, so then they have to go do it again. That's not terribly interesting in the elevator pitch to me. It's like, okay, well, I've already seen this movie with these characters. What new thing are we going to tell? Now, at the same time, when I got the first pitch for Jay and Silent Bob Strikes Back, the pitch of they're making a Bluntman and Chronic movie, I probably didn't think a lot of that, other than the fact that I was really into Jay and Silent Bob at the time. And now it's many years past that it's hard to say that I have the same love of the characters because they've been gone for a long time. Yeah, who knows what he's going to do with it? And Kevin, at least lately, has been doing more projects. He's been doing more work. He's been making films on his own. He's been directing shows for the CW, and he's going to be doing something else that we're going to talk about.
Yep.
So I'm glad to see him doing stuff. And I can't say that I'm not glad to see Jay and Silent Bob return, because I was certainly excited for Clerks 3, and I was certainly excited for Mallrats as a series or whatever. We'll just have to wait and see.
Now, I honestly, I didn't think that, or I thought that Kevin Smith owned the rights for the movies.
No, it
Like
was
the
Miramax. You know, the first time
yeah,
out, he made Clerks himself, and it was all his own baby and everything. But when those production companies start getting involved, contracts start getting signed, and it's a question of how much of this do you actually get to keep.
yeah, because that's the part that, because I'm seeing this in the big post that he had. It's like, so I don't own Clerks, Mallrats, Chasing Amy, or Dogma, but I do. This is him talking, but I do own Jay and Silent Bob. That I find really interesting. Like, he doesn't own, because I would, honestly, you say, who would like to, who would want to see Jay and Silent Bob in their 40s? I would. I want to see where they would go in, as they're 40 years old. you know Maybe one of the things in the movie is Jay is now a father,
Right.
and
See,
how that.
that would be something else, and that's sort of what Clerks 2 did. Is they took us to what Clerks would be today, and it was like, okay, they're not still at the quick stop, they're doing something else, but you get to see them making that next step into real adulthood. And with Jay and Silent Bob, it's a question of, okay, I would be interested to see, they're not hanging out in front of a store selling weed to kids anymore, but they're still going to up and run to Hollywood to try to stop a remake of a movie based off of the fact that it was off their likenesses before. It's just, that sounds a little bit too much like they haven't changed. And that's exactly the problem that he had said about Jay and
Yeah,
Silent Bob in their 40s, is that if they haven't grown up, then it just looks a little sad. I'm sure he's got a different way of looking at it, and I'm sure that creatively he'll come at it with a different approach than what I'm expecting.
yeah.
And that's the
I
beauty
mean,
of it, is you don't have a lot to prove with me, because I am a fan from way back. I was kind of a super fan for a long time. I've got my giant Silent Bob sitting up above me on a bookshelf. I've got the bookends. I've got a ton of fucking shit that is Jay and Silent Bob related. So I'm easy to convert.
yeah. There's also part of me that would sort of want to see whether it's a short or something, but that would be the setup for they're going back to Hollywood. Silent Bob is now just known as Bob, and he's like he does like these college tours as a speaker or something. Meanwhile,
he's the Milo Yiannopoulos or whatever the fuck his name is, like, going
no,
and people are just
not
yelling
not
at
that crazy, but yeah. And then Jay he's like a monk who's taken a vow of silence and whatnot, sort of thing. Like
no,
something like that.
Jay is obviously, he's a big proponent of medical marijuana, and is going around the libertarian circuit trying to get in politics by mistake.
Yes. But then the other bit of news here is, and the part of why the Mallrats and Clerks 3 got pushed back is because Kevin Smith is working on a new TV show. He's working on the Spawn spinoff for BBC America. This one focusing on the characters Sam and Twitch. Now, I'm not really a Spawn fan, so I know nothing of this other than Kevin Smith is going to be involved, and it'll be on BBC America.
All right, so I can speak to this a little bit. Sam and Twitch were introduced in the Spawn comics pretty much from the beginning. They're a pair of detectives. They've had a comic series before. Strangely enough, Brian Michael Bendis grew a lot in popularity when he was writing the Sam and Twitch stuff for Todd McFarlane Productions. That was before he moved over to Marvel and started doing stuff in the Ultimate Universe. That was kind of like not his initial launching point. He was writing his own stuff first. His I think Goldfish was one. He did a bunch of true crime stuff. Uh, Jinx may have been another one. It's been a long time since I've looked at his old stuff, but that was a book that he did. But the characters were created essentially by a friend of Todd's, and Todd used them in the book and thanked him for it. And I don't know if that guy ever got his big fucking movie check, so to speak. So it'll be interesting to see, because Todd's had some problems with giving people payouts for their stuff before. Neil Gaiman, haha. And so that didn't work out. In this regard, Kevin was recently trying to do a Buckaroo Banzai TV series, and that fell apart because the rights issues came up. I would hate to see that be a problem again, a la Kirkman had some problems with The Walking Dead in the first season or two because of the co-creator on the book. I don't know if that'll be the case, but BBC being involved in it, I can see this fitting their current generation of shows, because if you look at what Dirk Gently was, for instance, this last season on BBC, I could easily see a Sam and Twitch show, which is a couple of kind of hard-boiled detectives working together and solving mysteries that have to do with a horror element or a mysterious kind of X-Files-ish sort of way, but maybe more in the take of bigger horror elements like a John Constantine would fight. That kind of thing I could see working really well with their motif. And Kevin would be good for it. I think Kevin would be fun for it. And I'm glad to see him focus more on TV work, because I think some of these shorter storytelling things can be good for him right now, as he sort of still is working his way back to getting more in the public eye than he has been. Because a lot of his movies have been self-produced. They've been self-funded or funded through Patreons or Kickstarters and things. But Kevin was a big deal for a long time, and I think people forget that he was a really good director because he's had some unfortunate projects that haven't worked out, or he did Cop Out, which is not his fucking fault, dude. But whatever. This could be fun.
Yeah. No, I'm excited to see this because, you know, again, where I still have yet to finish Dirk Gently. That sounded a little dirty with how I ended that there, but you know, again, like you, I'm a big fan of Kevin Smith and his stuff. I believe I came in to his with, I think it was Dogma that I got to do first, and then watched Mallrats, watched, you know, all the other, you know, Chasing Amy, Dogma again, Clerks 2, all that. Actually, I was a little upset because my friend in high school wouldn't let me borrow his Clerks the animated series DVDs. I'm like, dude, I'll bring them back in a week. Not even a week. Knowing me, I'll get them back. I'll bring them back to you in 3 days. It's like, no, man. I'm like, Josh, come on. But no, so to see this, I mean, honestly, to see that, it's cool because I like, you know, I like seeing this, and I should also point out that Kevin Smith is attached to write, direct, and executive produce the series.
Yeah, and since it's BBC, we can expect that it's probably a shorter season as well.
Yes,
Which
because
again would be good. It would be nice to have something a little bit more succinct.
I could see this being a co-production with, you know, BBC proper, to where it airs over on like maybe BBC 2 or BBC 3 over in the UK. You know, once it gets like Orphan Black does here.
Yeah.
And all that. Well, I think that's going to do it here for the Else News. We will be right back.